Thank you for tuning in to my weekly show. As those of you who have listened to me before know, I have a personal injury law firm with offices in both Tucson and Phoenix, Arizona. We're one of the larger personal injury law firms in Arizona. And I like to do this show to talk about not only legal issues, but just topics that I think those of you who listen may find interesting. But today I want to talk about trucking accidents. And the reason I want to talk about trucking accidents is, quite honestly, I think it's a topic that a lot of people are unfamiliar with. But I think it's an important topic because excuse me, trucking accidents occur over and over again in the United States. I mean, statistically, there are about 500,000 trucking accidents in the U.S. every year. And approximately 5,000 of those accidents result in somebody being killed. And most of the time, the vast majority of the time, when somebody is killed in a trucking accident, it's not the person in the semi-truck. It's the person who's in a regular passenger vehicle, whether it's an SUV, a sedan, a sports car, or a van, who is involved in the accident with the semi-truck. And again, just for clarification, as I talk about trucking accidents, really I'm talking about 18-wheelers, those big tractor trailers that are carrying, that have a big trailer that they're pulling, whether it's for Walmart, Swift Trucking, or a number of other things. I did a blog a while back about the trucking accident that actor Tracy Morgan was involved in. It's that kind of accident, and it can be severe. Keep in mind, for example, that accident that actor Tracy Morgan was involved in involved a tractor trailer hitting his bus. And a bus is big. It's much bigger than your car. And in that accident, one person was killed. Tracy Morgan was severely injured. So you can imagine the damage that occurs when regular vehicles are involved in accidents with tractor trailers. It's horrific. And in a lot of those accidents, tractor trailers, tumble over and crush cars and people. Those tractor trailers will explode. That happens relatively often. So they're just pretty horrific accidents. In fact, I think the statistics are 1 out of every 8 traffic fatalities in the U.S. involves a trucking collision. So it's huge. It's a big issue, and it involves a big industry. Trucking companies this year, I think in 2015, are projected to, make, close to $1 trillion in revenue. That's big business, and they're very sophisticated companies. And when a trucking accident happens, trucking companies have a set way that they deal with those accidents, and they deal with them in that set way in order to limit their liability as much as possible and protect themselves as much as possible. So, I think it's a very important topic that most people know very little about. And if you're ever involved in an accident with a semi-truck, it can have huge ramifications on your life. Now, the fact that semi-trucks are so big and so heavy, and so dangerous to regular passenger vehicles, then the danger gets compounded by a number of things. And when I say a number of things, really what I'm talking about are those things that actually cause trucking accidents. And one of those things is driver fatigue. Truckers or truck drivers, drive all day, every day for a living. And there are federal regulations that dictate how fast those trucks are supposed to go, how many hours a day those drivers can drive, how long their breaks need to be so that they can rest. All of those things are regulated. And what you find in huge numbers of these trucking accidents is the drivers violated those regulations, either because they chose to in order to deliver their load on time, or unfortunately sometimes because the trucking companies push them to violate those regulations in order to deliver loads on time. And so driver fatigue is huge. I mean, I think that statistically it contributes to about 40% of the trucking accidents that happen. But then other factors are things like driving under the influence. Unfortunately, many drivers choose to either drink or use drugs, for whatever reason, and they do it while they're driving all day or all night, whenever they choose to drive. Sometimes quite honestly, my common sense tells me maybe drivers will drive under the influence or abuse drugs in order to keep them awake so they can drive longer. But it impedes their ability to drive. Inattention. I mean, we had a huge trucking accident here in Arizona a while back where the trucker actually ran into a bunch of cars on the side of the highway, a number of which were police cruisers who were out dealing with, I believe, a separate accident. And the driver was driving along, at least the evidence from what I understand from that case showed, was quite honestly he was on his cell phone, messing around on the internet, watching porn on his cell phone. And even though that was against company regulations, and I believe the company even had a camera within the cab of the truck, he'd actually put his wallet over the front of the camera to cover it up so he could violate the company rules, because he's driving down the highway and he's bored. And he's not paying attention, and he plows into a bunch of vehicles on the side of the road and killed, I believe, at least one highway patrolman. You've got defective equipment. That's a big thing on these trucks. They run all day, every day, putting hundreds of thousands of miles on their trucks, and if they're not properly serviced, something breaks and the driver can no longer control the vehicle, and somebody gets hurt. If the truck is improperly loaded or overloaded, that creates accidents, and that happens a lot. Lack of driver training and experience, that's a big thing. Driving a truck is, quite honestly, is a hard job. You're doing it all day, every day. It's a very difficult job. These big trucks are very difficult to handle. And, driver training and experience is a big part of how accidents happen. Dangerous weather conditions. We see that a lot in Arizona. In particular, what we see in Arizona are dust storms. And when trucks, again, they've got a schedule to meet, and they choose to keep rolling down the highway at a time when the wind's blowing really badly, and the dust is blowing, and there's a high likelihood of a dust storm. If that truck ends up in the middle of a dust storm and hits other cars, other passenger vehicles, causes huge damage. I was just watching the news the other day. There was bad weather in the Midwest somewhere, and the wind was blowing so badly it actually blew over a number of semi-trucks that were driving down the highway. That's a big issue. Excessive speed, certainly. Now, I think trucking companies try to put, or some trucks have regulators that regulate how fast a truck can go. But I think we've all been driving down a highway or a freeway, and we've seen a truck go barreling by us at a high rate of speed, faster than we're going. And so, driving those big, giant trucks way too fast is a big problem. And the reason, I think understanding all of those things is so important, is because if you're ever involved in an accident with a truck, or somebody or someone in your family is, you need to understand that these accidents can be very, very complex. And it really is important that you find somebody to help you on your claim, hire a lawyer to help you on your claim quickly. Because what happens is all this evidence that exists at the time of the accident begins to disappear right away. Everything from skid marks to yaw marks on the highway. Information regarding kind of what the weather was like, the ability to get pictures of all the vehicles involved, of the truck, all of those things. The more time that goes by beyond the accident, the greater the likelihood that your ability to gather that evidence starts to disappear. That's very important. I can tell you, in a lot of these accidents, the trucking company will get somebody out to that accident scene right away. And they're getting them out there to start to preserve the evidence that they think they can use in their favor. Wouldn't surprise me a bit if they kind of ignore the evidence that isn't favorable to them, because their concern is to protect themselves. And so you need to be able to preserve the evidence that is favorable to you in your negligence claim against the truck driver and the trucking company. That's the other reason. Another complication in these cases is you have lots of parties involved. In a car accident, you'll generally go just, if you've got to sue somebody, you sue the driver that ran into you. In a trucking case, you've got to be concerned about suing the truck driver, who tend to be transient, meaning they're hard to find because they're driving all over the country. Not all of them have a set address that you can find them at to serve them with a lawsuit. All of those things. You're really, you always look at the trucking company and whether or not you need to sue them. You potentially have to look at equipment manufacturers or whoever's doing the maintenance on the vehicle and possibly suing them. You've got other negligent drivers potentially involved because, quite honestly, in most trucking accidents I've seen, there are far more than simply two vehicles involved, unfortunately. And when the truck driver starts to blame another driver, you need to have time to investigate that. And then you've got government entities potentially. Is there improper road design? There is something that the government created or did that creates a negligence claim against them in this case. And all of those things have potentially much shorter timelines, one, to bring the claim. But generally, if you're going to bring a claim against a government entity, you have a very short time frame to do it. And before doing that, you have to investigate it. And so if you go and hire an attorney 6 months after the accident occurred, it may be too late to do a number of those things. In addition to those issues that make things complicated, you also want to preserve evidence. Driver logs, federal regulations require trucking companies to keep certain records and drivers to keep certain records, but only for a certain amount of time. And if that time lapses and you haven't done anything to make the driver or put the driver on notice and the company on notice that they need to preserve that evidence, then suddenly it gets destroyed and it's no longer available to you in your claim. So these cases are much different than normal car accident cases, and they're much more complicated. And so, you really, I can tell you, and I've been handling personal injury cases for 17, going on 18 years now. If you're involved in an accident with a trucking company, you really want to immediately hire an attorney who handles these cases, who knows how to handle big, complicated cases against trucking companies. You don't want to wait. In my opinion, you don't even want to wait a couple of months because they're so complicated and because there's so many factors involved. You really want to immediately hire somebody who handles these cases and knows how to handle them so they can start to represent you and start to do the things that need to be done. Now keep in mind, from a safety perspective, there are things that you should do as a driver in order to protect yourself. and I want to go through a couple of those things. I mean, one of the things you want to make sure you do is, keep plenty of distance between you and the truck that's driving either in front of you, behind you, or beside you. You don't want to be up close to them, and you really don't want to be up close to them from behind. The reason, quite honestly, is because one of the main types of accidents that unfortunately kill drivers is underwriting. And that's when your vehicle goes up under the truck. And I can tell you, I think most of the time when that happens, it happens when a passenger vehicle is driving behind a truck and the truck stops immediately. And the vehicle goes up under it. And what that tends to do, as gruesome as it sounds, is it tends to decapitate the people in the front of that passenger vehicle that goes up under that truck. You do not want to be there, and it's easily avoided. And the way you avoid it is you just don't get close. You don't follow closely to the rear of a truck. You stay far back. Very, very important. You don't want to try to pass a truck on the right who may be trying to turn right. Keep in mind, if you're driving in town, these trucks make very wide turns. So a semi-truck won't get in the right-hand turn lane in order to make a right turn because you're not able to. The truck will stay in one of the lanes further to the left. Generally, let's say the center lane, if you've got 3 lanes, you have median lane, a center lane, and a right turn lane. They'll generally stay in that center lane and make that right turn. Now, they should have their blinker on. Sometimes, it's like anything else, truck drivers forget. And so if you go up next to them and you're not paying attention and they start to make that right turn and you're in the right turn lane too trying to make a right turn, they're going to run right over you. And when a truck runs over you, that's generally thought of as an overriding accident, where the truck drives over your vehicle. So be very careful when you're approaching a truck and you're on the right side, especially in that turning scenario. Stay out of trucks' blind spots. If a truck can't see you because you're in their blind spot, and you're driving down the freeway next to them and you're in their blind spot, and they change lanes, they're going to run over you. So stay out of the truck's blind spots. You need to drive defensively, which is, let's put it this way. For people who drive vehicles, I think most people don't tend to drive their cars defensively. But if you're driving around a bunch of trucks because you're on the highway or freeway or there's just lots of semi-trucks around you, try to switch that mindset and drive defensively. That's how you protect yourself. I think it's very important. Those are the basic ins and outs about trucking accidents and the things that I think are very important. You want to have some, and again, to just kind of recap, you don't want to be involved in an accident with a semi-truck. They're just horrific. So if you're on the road and there are a number of semi-trucks around you, drive very, very carefully and very defensively in order to avoid a collision. Because you as a driver of a passenger vehicle, if you're involved in a collision with a semi, even though it's not your fault, you're going to really get the short end of that stick. And when you've been severely injured or you've been killed, being right, being the one who wasn't negligent, doesn't do you any good. But if you are involved in an accident with a semi-truck, the best advice I can give you is hire an attorney immediately who handles these cases and who knows what they're doing. Because they're very complex, they're very complicated, and there are things that really your attorney needs to start doing for you right away. 6 months later can be too late. 1 year later can be too late. So these things need to start to happen right away. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at dzanes@zaneslaw.com. Have a great week, and until next week, take care of yourself.